again, and welcome to our Backyard Vineyard Project. We are building the Gavilan Hills Vineyard here at Paradise Ranch. Please click the link in the bottom corner and join along with us. Our 5-year mission is to seek out quality grapes and a perfect bottle of wine, and to boldly go where we have not gone before. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to follow along and help us out on our quest. The princess of the house, if she sees this portion of the video, will completely disavow and disown us completely. So I need your help. Please click below and follow along. Welcome to Chapter 4. We finally got some nice, beautiful weather out here. It's going to be 85 to 90. We finally can get some work done. We did a ton of work yesterday on the vineyard, so it's moving along really nicely. Chapter 4 is essentially installing the wire. Up to this point, we laid out the vineyard, we set our fence posts and our posts, as you can see. Next step was to run the wire. Before we did the wire though, I brought my son in, and obviously young muscles are a hell of a lot better than mine. And we marked where the vines are gonna go. He drilled with our auger, he drilled 3 to 4 holes at each spot. We're using a 6-foot auger, so we wanted the holes to be at least 12 to 15, 18 inches wide, and the same, about 12, 14, 18 inches deep. I wanted to make sure I had plenty of growth for the new vines. Some areas we had rocks or roots or something and we couldn't get that. We'll just dig that out later. But you can see that we've got the holes for the vines all over the hill. Once we got the holes dug, then we ran the wire. Now we're using the standard VSP or mid-cordon training system. So our bottom wire here, the bottom wire is going to be the wire for our irrigation, and that'll be our next step. The next wire up at 36 inches is where the vines are going to grow. When vines grow up and we separate them in the next year or so, that's the vine we're going to use, or the wire. There's a lot of discussions, and I was actually at a couple of vineyards where some of the wires were as high as 48 inches. Other ones say you should do it at 30 inches. There's all these different discussions on where that wire should be. I did it at 36. The only reason I did it at 36 is because it's in the middle. Symmetrically, it looked good. That gives me 3 feet of wire and growth for the shoots above. It just seemed to be the right height for it. So we're using 36 on that. The wire we use is a 12 gauge wire. We're using 12 gauge wire on these 2 rows. And the 12 gauge wire is hooked into the end post with a wire vise. You simply slide the wire vise on, and when you get it on, it slides through. And it'll just keep sliding, but it will not come back. There's no way it's gonna come back. So once I put it through the post, I tighten this up, and it makes for a very nice little mechanism to later on, if I have to, when the wires get to be loose, you just hook onto the wire, pull it through, and you can just do it a little bit more. So these wire vise systems are pretty good. They're very clean. They look real well. They're clean at the ends. At one end, at the end that you see, which is farther down there, all I did was I cut the wire right there. I won't be doing any adjustments. So you barely see anything on those wires. And at the ends down here, we made them a little looser, so I can get room to pull on them as they come through, and I'll show you that in a minute. One other thing we need to talk about is the bracing of the posts. I said I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to put any kind of bracing in because I actually don't have room over there, and I didn't think I needed it because I don't have that many vines on the wire. Well, I was wrong. These posts, these landscaping posts that we have here, are 3.5 inches or so. The big 4-inch posts that I showed earlier in the earlier video, those hold up really well. These flat, you can see that they're flat on one side. There's a lots of flexibility in it when you start pulling those wires through. When you start pulling this wire, you'll notice that the post starts to turn over a little bit. So I need to put in bracing. Not as much on round ones right now, but on these I need to put in bracing. And since I'm using a smaller gauge, I'm only using 14 gauge on this, primarily because I can bend it a lot easier with my fingers. A 12 gauge is a little bit harder to deal with. So we're using 12 gauge wire hooked to the top with an eye hook. I'm putting an eye hook, and I'll show you this. I put an eye hook on the top of the post. Then I run these lawn anchors, I call them, into the ground. They essentially twist into the ground. You'll see that much above ground. You can't pull these things out. And then we're using turnbuckles for our wire coming down. So I've got the eye hook at the top. I've got this landscape spike at the bottom, and then turnbuckles in the middle. That's all we're doing on the bracing. The problem is I have one section of vines on the other side of the house that we're going to be using as a way of showing people up close, and there was no way of getting 45-degree angles out of those posts. And so I'm using a method I used when I was a general contractor when we were setting large posts in the ground that were 12 feet in the air, and we wanted to get a good support on it from the pole. We're using a special kind of bracing on that, and I'll show you that. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of this. We'll look at the bracing, and I want to show how I put in the wire on two posts over here, just to kind of give you an idea. Let's go over there and take a look at it. Simon's here with me. Come on, Simon, you want to come along? Come on. So here's one of the end posts. This end post, as I said, has the wire vise on both ends, and there's a little bit of wire sticking out that I'm going to be able to adjust that later. But I had to put in this wire vise, or this support. So up on the top, I've got an eye hook that I put in, running the wire down to the lawn stake, and I essentially just put a buckle in the middle, tighten it up, pulls the post back, and this post it's not going anywhere. So I put one here, one there, one there, one there. So these four end posts here all have support brackets on them. Fairly simple for this particular vineyard or what we're doing, and it makes it nice because now these wires are pretty tight all the way across and can hold the weight for the irrigation on the bottom and then the vines on the second row. This is a special side section I'm going to be using for demo and presentation. It's up against the side of the house. This side of the house has full sun. We have full sun all day. It's on the south facing side, so this gets pretty warm. The inside of the house gets real warm as well. So I'm hoping that by putting vines up, we can help that out. I've also got to watch these vines for them to get maybe too much sun and get that sunburn they talk about. But essentially, I've got four sets of vines, four vines. We're growing 2 Cabernet Sauvignon and 2 Grenache here. So when people come in, I can actually talk to them about the vineyard if they have questions and show them. So this is a special section of the vineyard, and as you can see on the ends, I did a special type of bracket on these and support because these posts were moving as I was tightening up the wire. So as you can see on this particular trellis system, I've got a different kind of support. Obviously I couldn't run a 45-degree down because it'd be in the middle of the concrete and you'd be walking on it. And on that side it would go in. So what we've done is we've done a special kind of bracing, and essentially we still have an eye hook at the top, an eye hook at the bottom, and the buckle that tightens it up. In the middle there's a 12-inch or so piece of PVC that I've notched. If you can see, I cut this pipe. It was 8 feet long. I cut it into 12-inch sections, notched the end to put the wire through, so the wire comes out, goes through there. It's pretty sturdy. Damn hot from the sun. And what it does is it pulls against the top of the bracket of posts. So if there's any weight on this post won't move because the weight on the top is pulled against the bottom, and it pulls it back. So if you can see, this thing is not moving at all, unlike the loose ones. So this is what we're doing here, but I wanted to make it very clean, so when people come look, they'll know what we're trying to accomplish in the big vineyard. So let me show you how to set the trellis wire. I'll just do this one with the wire vise. First thing I need to do So I need to drill a hole. Now, whoops, I'm gonna fall over on this hill. I don't know, you don't need this. I have a large drill bit. You probably only need 6 inches to go through. But I point it right at the other post. I point it right at the other post and drill it through. These are the large 4-foot posts that I told you about, that they don't move much. They're pretty stable here in the ground. The second thing I need to do after I drill that is the wire vise. If you take a look at it, you want it to be up against the wood. So I want to drill a hole a little bit bigger just so I can fit the back part of the wire vise in the hole. So I'm just using a, what is this? 1/2 inch. I'm using a 1/2 inch wood bit. And I already measured on the bit how far in I needed to go. So if you look, I only go in about the same distance as the bit itself. Okay, once I've got the holes drilled, it's pretty simple. I've already set the wire vise on the other side with wire in it. And essentially the wire vise is cone shaped. So you drill a hole big enough so that the wire vise goes in, and then there's some screws I come by later on and I'll put the screws in. So let me get the other wire. I'll stretch this other wire out and put it through the base hole. Typically make a little straight. Take the wire vise and stick the wire vise on, and it'll slide right on in, and it's essentially set. Now what I want to do is I want to make the wire tight. So by making the wire tight, I simply pull it with my wrench the best I can, slide the wire vise back, and it's pretty tight. But I want to go a little bit tighter than that, so I use vice grips on the wire vise, and using my other wrench as leverage, I can pull a little bit more wire. Come on, move back. There we go. I can get a little bit tighter on it, and that gives me about 1 inch, 1.5 inches of wire sticking out. I can just have it down so it's out of the way. So there, my wire is set and it's ready to go. And I'll set the next wire up here for the trellis wire for the vines. Essentially the wire is set. What I'm going to be doing then is running irrigation next along these wires on the bottom. You can also see the holes that we've already dug for the vines up here. There was about, since we've got 200 vines, we only drilled the hose for these. There was 150, and he drilled about 3 to 4 holes each. My son was a monster. He drilled 3 or 4 holes at each one of these to make it nice and soft. So essentially he drilled like 400 holes the other day. I'm sure glad he did it, not me. Here's a pretty good view of one portion of the vineyard. You can see right here, this is the waterfall that's going to be coming down during some of our events, and the grapevines are actually encircling the waterfall nicely, which makes it pretty good. You can take a look at it closely also, and on these posts right here, if you look at those, you can barely see the wire vise on the ends, which makes it nice. You don't see any wire, you don't see any excess wire sticking out to make it kind of ugly and unattractive. But you can see how I've got the vineyard up and around the hill, and it actually goes up around the gazebo on top, which is going to look pretty good when it gets all done. One of the projects we worked on recently was this tree up here. If you notice that big tree, it was all the way down to the ground. It was, and we couldn't get the vines around the tree as well as I wanted. But now that we trimmed it back, the nice thing is, and I'm going to cover this in a later video, but I'm going to use one of the plants that keeps gophers away. Underneath that tree at the base, I'm going to put a giant garden with geraniums. And geraniums is a great plant to keep gophers. And as I mentioned earlier, we're going to be putting some plants there, plants along the front, and even up in the back of the gazebo. And that will help us deter gophers, which I'll cover in a later video. Thank you for joining me on this short video. Essentially running for our small backyard vineyard. We figure we ran about 900 feet of wire, and we're not even done. I still have to put the wire at the top, and then I'm going to put in 2 wires the shoots that come up and go through the wire. Click on the link below, subscribe, and click for notifications so you know each time we put up another video. We're getting pretty close to getting the vines. I checked with the supplier. Let's see, I checked with the supplier this week. We're supposed to be getting the vines in about 3 weeks. That'll put it about the end of March. I let the vines accumulate starting April 1st. We should be installing vines. So we're getting pretty close. So please join us. Click below, and I'd love to have you with us. Again, this is Jeff and Simon. Again, this is Jeff. Till next time, we're signing off. We're out.